Thank you. Thank you very much. That's beautiful. What an amazing ministry here at Lighthouse. The shadows, your testimonies give way to the whole team, I think, of your attitudes, your mindset, and what the Lord is pleased to use you for, and how he's working in you. So thank you for that. It's just such a blessing to hear that. A couple of things to take care of before I get going here. Somebody needs their $5 back. What is it worth? It's still worth $5. So I'm going to leave it right here. So please come and get it. It was someone here, but everybody's moved around. I want to be sure not to forget that. Also, thank you. The coffee here is on point. I come from Portland, which is Coffee Snob Central, and that coffee was excellent. So thank you for that as well. One more thing, I've had some conversations with some of you more on the theological level about what was shared last night, about the sovereignty of God and disability, for example. And I would encourage you, grab one of the Lighthouse families that's here, talk to them. They would love to meet up with you to work out some of those implications of the gospel, the sovereignty of God, disability and suffering. I'm very thankful for those conversations, and it blessed me to have a brief conversation this morning about that very thing. So please reach out to a family here. Before I forget, because I forget things, this book, Accessible Church by Sandra Peoples, that Crossway put out just a couple of months ago, this is the book. This book is excellent. This is one of the most practical books. I think it's the most practical book that's been written on the subject of disability in the church. First couple of chapters are theology, and the rest is very, very practical. Find this book, order this book. I'm sure it'll be stocked here as well. Excellent, excellent book. And I owe a debt of gratitude to Sandra Peoples for her help, even on some of the aspects of training that we're going to be expanding into in the months to come. We're going to get right to it. This is the practical section. And as I was working on this over the last week and a half, was thinking, there's so much that I don't know. I'm just a dad who happens to be involved in this ministry. So I grabbed as many of the parts and pieces of training that our team does, tried to cram it into an hour. And so we're going to move quickly. But one disclaimer, maybe not so much a disclaimer, is that this is introductory. This is remedial. This is disability ministry and the church 101. This is not going to be programmatic. This is not going to be something that answers all your questions and gives you all the strategies. So take this. There's parts and pieces you can use. You shadows, you experienced people in the rooms, parents. Some of this you're going to be like, yeah, okay. But bear with me as we move through this. Disability ministry is about life together. Really, the church is about life together, that Paul talked about the inclusion staircase last night. It's life together. And that means it's a continuum of care. So when we think about that continuum of care that I talked about last night, that it's ministry that's cradle to the grave, that we're taking into account the kinds of disabilities that we may encounter, and that we're taking into account the stages of life that cross over with those disabilities. Often in cases of maybe more severe level 2 or level 3 autism, there's these unexpected transitions, puberty being one of those, where all of a sudden overnight that child's behaviors have changed, their interests may have changed, their escalations may have changed. So we need to recognize those stages of life and be in such connection with those that we're serving and with their caregivers that we're taking into account what's going on here, what can we do, how can we step in. And I would say generally in the life with disability, it is a series of unexpected transitions. In a, quote, typical family, we have grade school, we have middle school, we have high school, we have college. In the church setting, we're moving through infants and toddlers, and we're moving into these very clearly identified categories that we move our children through. But when it comes to disability, those transitions are not that easy. There's things that pop up where you're really beholden to however that disability may play out in life, where the typical transition to high school will not be typical for a family experiencing disability. And we need to take into account those stages, and we need to keep in mind that this is cradle to the grave. A couple of weeks ago, our ministry was doing a training at a church in the Seattle area, and during one of the breaks, an elderly woman came up to one of our staff members, and she said, "I know it's a continuum of care, but my son has severe autism and he's 56. What happens to him when I'm gone?" Think about the stages of life. Remember, God numbers our days, and in this mom's case, she was probably 80, 84, 85, something like that. It's very real that her next concern is that though she will be in the grave and she will be in glory, who's caring for her son? Think about what ministries might be available in that situation. Think of Christian residential facilities like our brother Greg is involved in Houston, Texas. What are resources that we can be thinking ahead to? That we can help the family plan for the future, because it is a continuum of care. Life together. How can we build the relational ramps we were talking about last night? That other kind of accessibility to lovingly enfold these families in our churches. And our goal is always evangelism and discipleship and that depth of care on a spiritual level. That we are a place where the weak are indispensable, and that we're faithfully pursuing them, and that we're considering them and not just ourselves, not just being myopic, but that we're considering them for authentic relationship. And we talked about a number of these things last night, that in the pursuit of that relationship, that we would not be fearful, that we would be welcoming, that our ministries and our efforts to serve the members of the body starts in the parking lot. And it starts at the doors, and it continues on through the life and ministry of the church, the regular gatherings of God's people during the week, that we're welcoming, that we're being intentional in pursuing them, that when they're here, we're sitting with them. We're inviting them out to lunch, that we're seeking to go deeper with them, to bring them, hopefully, to God's word and encourage them. That we're being a good listener. There's a book by Pastor Dave Furman, who used to be in Dubai, I believe, called Being There. It is a very practical book about how to be with people in their suffering. And I've had some of those conversations here of wondering, how do you encourage someone who might be at kind of the height of their suffering, where it seems like the words that you would have, since you don't have that common experience, would seem trite? Often being a good listener is being the quiet one and doing exactly that, listening. I would encourage you to get that book and read it. It's very practical. It's very helpful about how we can minister to those who may be suffering, how we can ultimately point people to Christ, how we can have a posture of grace towards others, and communicating the work of God in your life. Often the need for broader involvement in their lives is necessary. What are other ways that you can step into their lives? I'm reminded of a story, because I think I like to tell stories. At our tiny little church in Ukraine, we're talking 30, 40 people on a Sunday. This church had an active weekly outreach to the special needs community, which was a very isolated population. And there was a single mom with an adult son named Sasha. And Sasha would show up on the Friday nights for what we called Sport Bez Mej, which is Sport Without Limits. It was our outreach for kids of all ages. Sasha, when he first started coming, was probably about 16, if I remember right. He was just a joy. He loved to be there. Sasha had autism. Sasha was a survivor of leukemia. And over time, Sasha began to really connect with our volunteers. We hosted it at the church location. Most of our volunteers were people from the church, so those relationships were being built. And then Sasha was living in a nearby village, and he learned the bus system so that he could get to church on Sundays. Sasha was the one who, during the singing, was the one who would carry out that last note longer than anybody else, even after the music had stopped. But to us, and mind you, it's a small church, so it stood out. But that was Sasha. We loved Sasha. It was such a grace to see that over time, Sasha came to faith and to see how he desired to be a part of the church. And to know the impact that this tiny little church full of broken people embraced Sasha with the gospel. And to know that years later, during the invasion, Sasha and his mom were forced into the basement of their home by Russian soldiers and lived in the basement for 6 weeks while their entire village was being razed to the ground, while Sasha was recovering from another bout of leukemia. The damage done to Sasha during that was pretty intense. I got to see him 6 months after the liberation of their village in Art City. He was hospitalized near the end of another round of leukemia treatment that ultimately took Sasha's life. But we weep as those who have hope, because Sasha knew the one who gives life. Because God, through his people, had an authentic relationship with Sasha. So we pursue authentic relationship. We do things like simply starting a conversation. How are you doing? What is going well? What are the challenges? This can be going both directions with caregivers and parents, but with the individual as well. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. Ask hard questions. Ask what you can do better. That's one we don't like to do always. But be present and help them be known. Think of practical ways that you can serve them. Help them get out of the car, for example. Again, taking the intention to sit with them, take them to coffee, do whatever is needed. Set little goals that you can try to achieve. There's so much that we can do. But as the church, let's consider, what does life together look like for us? What does our corporate worship setting look like? Is the family active in worship, or is it just one parent and the other stays at home? How are the siblings being enfolded into the church? Are there any barriers that a family would encounter coming into your church? That could be physical barriers like ramps or no ramps. That could be maybe just a welcoming barrier. Do they feel welcome? I love that the young man that was leading worship and song last night and today, stand as you are able. That's an important statement. That statement means a lot to me. That's considerate. Think of those kinds of things that might be a barrier. And then we talk about from community worship to community life. What are the other functions of the church during the week? What are the community groups or life groups or small groups or equipping classes, Sunday school classes, other Bible studies? Are there ways that you can help the individual with special needs into those environments, into those aspects of the body functioning? Is there a way for you to show greater modesty and honor in involving them in community life? And then participation. I think it was clear last night when Paul talked about the inclusion staircase, that our goal is to not see those with special needs and their families or caregivers just as recipients. Sometimes we can see them as sort of a bucket that we pour our gifts of mercy into, that we show love and compassion to. But there's more to it. I think it was clear last night that we want to see them transition from recipient to participant in the life of the body, to participate in what is going on here. And we may need to think creatively about how to do that. Share a brief story about that. Our Eli, who you guys got to see last night, he'll be here later. When he was almost 18, everybody knows that Eli loves music. Eli knows the lyrics to every Christian song, I think, ever. He's like an anthology of Christian music, both good and bad. But he just loves to sing. And the worship director at the church we were at in Bend had gotten to know Eli through one of our retreats that he had volunteered at. And he came to us and he said, hey, I know Eli loves music, and I want him on the worship team. Now, first of all, Eli's voice is not like this clarion, crystal clear voice. But then the next words were, I want him to use the shaker. I love my son, but his rhythm, it's not. It's syncopated, I guess is the word. I don't use big words often, but I've heard that would be a way to describe it. So he said, that's what I'd like to do. And Tamara and I, we're not like the super advocate parents that are like, oh yeah, let's get, we need to force them up front. We need to shake this church to the ground. We're just like, no. What are you talking about? And in the end, we just stepped back and we said to Calvin, this worship director, we said, Calvin, we know that you care about Eli. We're going to leave it in your hands. So if you want Eli to do this, you just let us know when we drop him off for practice or whatever. We're his transportation, but this is on you. So over the next several weeks, Eli would go to practice, and Calvin had taken the music and he highlighted the spots where he's like, Eli, right where it's bright yellow, just shake like mad. So Eli had sheet music that is unlike any other I've seen. So the day came when Eli was on stage. And Tamara and I were just sitting there like, we didn't want to stand for the music. We just wanted to bury our heads because we're just like, this is just, to us, it's just, we don't like the upfront stuff. And Eli did his thing. He just gets into it. He is not performing. He doesn't even know there's an audience. To him, it's an audience of one. Eli is a believer. Eli can articulate the gospel. Eli has been baptized. And we made it through that. And immediately after the service, we turn, pick up our Bibles, and then there's people there. And person after person came to us and said, thank you. Thank you for allowing him to serve in that way, because God used that to center our hearts and take our eyes off ourselves. Thank you. And as person after person and tears came by, then Tamara and I were kind of a mess after that. And it became a regular thing that every 6 weeks or so, up until it was probably 6 or 7 months before we had moved off to Ukraine, that every 6 or 7 weeks, Eli was up there as part of this team of people, serving in a way that the church found appropriate, serving in a way that did honor and show greater modesty to Eli. So be creative in thinking about the ways that you can involve people and with special needs to be participants in the body. And sometimes you're going to have to broaden the perspectives of those around you to help them be okay of hey, yeah, the timestamp's going to be a little different for the service, or the sound isn't going to be quite what you would want it to be. There might be this kid in the back with a shaker that's going nuts, but to God be the glory for that. So there may need to be a broadening of perspectives, but we know that God has gifted the whole body. Find ways to engage those gifts. We can all serve together. How can we enfold those experiencing disability into your corporate worship? Again, what barriers exist? Are there mobility restrictions? Are there sensory things within your service to consider, whether it's lighting or decibels? I am older, so the decibels becomes more important to me now, but consider those things. Make it more accessible. Is it attitudes maybe of congregants even that you need to address? Evaluate the access to your ministry. Discuss it with the families, with the caregivers. and expect some of those conversations to be kind of raw, kind of rough. A lot of times families like mine are pretty wounded, rightfully or wrongfully, but be open to those conversations. What else is there access to in your Sunday service? Is there access to the preaching, to the singing, to the prayer? Better, what is the access to baptism and communion, the Lord's Supper? Or other children's ministries if it's a child, or your youth ministries if it's a young adult, or if there's a group of young professionals, or what we would say college and career back in the old days. Is there accessibility for the 28-year-old member of your church with an intellectual disability into that community at a peer level? Think through those things. Be welcoming and hospitable and intentional. Even think through policies and procedures internally. Your intake forms and your follow-ups are a great means, actually, of hospitality, of showing shepherding care to the parent, to the child, to the caregiver. Consider those things. We don't always think of policies and procedures and intake forms as a means of hospitality, but it really can be. How intentional you are in those communications, those standard things that we all have to do. There's a way to do it, I think, that shows loving intention. And again, the community life piece. Your Bible studies or equipping classes or children's ministry, are there things that need to be done with a curriculum to make those more accessible? What are some accommodations that you would put in place so that you can serve the individual with special needs that might be in a specific class, or adaptations? I'll mention it later, but there is Awe and Wonder is a ministry on the East Coast that does Sunday school curriculum. It's a subscription service, but her lessons are excellent and includes picture identification systems. So there's PECs, so that the child can be involved in answering the question with picture identification stuff. You download it, you print it off, you laminate it. It's excellent curriculum, but it's also a great way not only to get the gospel into the hearts and minds of these children, but also to lovingly accommodate and modify and adjust to helping a child be able to thrive in that aspect of the ministry of the church. Train your teachers. When you have children's ministry training, typically it involves all the safety stuff, all the liability-related stuff that is very, very necessary, or going over curriculum decisions or the application of curriculum for the year. But think about introducing training that is specifically geared around disability, so that this is not just the shadow. I'll use Lighthouse as an example, and I'm not being pejorative, but so it's not just the shadows who are trained and educated, but so that the whole congregation then, who are the serving members of the body, are getting this same foundation and understanding to be a loving and enfolding congregation. And even at a congregational level beyond that, helping the rest of the congregation to see all image bearers equally and essential and functioning parts of the body, like what Paul talked about last night. And consider what other rhythms of life that some of these families may have, whether it's multiple therapy visits that they have to go to throughout the week for PT, OT, medical appointments, dialysis, whatever it may be, and how during the week can one or two people come alongside a family and help them in those what are normal rhythms to life to those families, that you could step in and help. And then the recipient to participant once more. God has given gifts to the members of the body. How do we engage those gifts to take them from recipient to participant? Serving others, thinking creatively or outside the box. There's Another story just popped into my mind. Same church in Ukraine. I love Ukraine, so I'll talk about it as much as I can. We had a young man that showed up at the outreach who had grown up in an orphanage. His name's Vitya. He was 31 when we met him. He was born without arms. He has two kind of legs that are very hard for him to get around on. One lacks a knee and is shorter than the other. So to watch him walk was painful, but he was living on his own. He'd been released from the institution. His dad didn't want to have anything to do with him. His mom couldn't care for him, but a lady in our city found an apartment for him. I still don't know exactly how Vitya found us, but Vitya started coming to our outreach. He befriended our family, so we spent a lot. He is hilarious. We spent a lot of time with Vitya. On Sunday mornings, we were trying to figure out ways that we could help the body come alongside Vitya and not be afraid of him. We were still overcoming some of those cultural things. And Vitya came to us and said, "Hey, I can do slides for the projector." Vitya, how are you going to do slides for a projector? And he sat down, and he actually is a programmer with his toes. And so we watched Vitya cruising around and we're like, that's amazing. So the projector is right up front, the keyboard's right up front, and there's Vitya sitting there with no arms and just his feet, his twisted legs, running the projector, putting up these songs of worship to God. And I think that is a beautiful example of how everyone can serve. What an amazing thing. God is so blows our minds with the things that he does and puts in front of us. We all have gifts to bring to the body. We all have ways to participate. And let's be very mindful of those in our midst with special needs. Again, intake forms. These are samples. I would ask you to consider simplifying your form and then follow up with more specific questions. We, as parents of a child with special needs, we fill out so many documents. And it's not all e-sign because we're working with the government on half of them. It's fill this out, fax it. I don't even know what a fax is anymore. All we do is fill this stuff out. So make your intake form simple but direct. Find ways to ask the hard questions on the side, but be thoughtful about your intake forms and how you can get just enough information to have an idea of how to move forward and also how to have some objectives for that individual that the form pertains to. Again, it's another way of showing hospitality. And now I got to really get moving. Okay. Strategies to serve. Now, as we consider, I'm going to give you 7 strategies. Now, these are not, it's going to say top 7. That's just for today. This stuff changes all the time. And again, this right here is strategy, just Justin walk out the door and give you this book. But as we consider this, 2 caveats, every child is different. One thing that we say in the special needs community and our friends with autism, if you've met a person with autism, you have met exactly one person with autism. Every child is different. And even the best laid plans, stuff change. I mean, the testimony that was just shared, things don't always go as expected. Plans are great, I hear. There was... If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I think that's Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live, but I might skip over that. So keep those 2 things in mind. And here we go. The top 7. Number 1 is and always will be the gospel. That is a strategy, that is a goal, that is our objective. Being reminded of the things that we heard last night. We're created in his image. We are created with intention. We're created for each other, the body of Christ. The weaker members are indispensable, and that we are here to evangelize and disciple all image bearers. So the gospel is number 1. Number 2, I love this. There's a a man that's now gone to be with the Lord that started a ministry back east called Rise Above Ministries. And he's the one, as far as I know, is the first guy to take the idea. So where this comes from in our world, again, speaking as a parent, is the individualized education plan. And this is another thing that has caused a lot of stress and just consternation in the lives of many parents, unless they're in a good school district, is working out this plan. That's all the educational goals and all the behavioral goals and all the things that they hope the school system, the teachers, everybody hopes to help this child in their development. That's the idea behind this, except much better, that it's an individualized discipleship plan. So that when we look at our brother or sister with special needs, we're not looking at them again as just the child that we're going to care for today, that this is a daycare program, but that we have objectives, that we have goals, that we have objectives and goals that are spiritually related. Yes, and some of them will be social goals of, hey, let's try to have him be around Todd for 5 minutes before he takes a swing at him. And then let's get that goal to 10 minutes and then 15 minutes. But it's a thoughtful and caring way that we can be intentional in our discipleship, especially when you think about a shadow or buddy ministry where it can't be the same person every Sunday, where you have to revolve people through. But you can have that continuity and that consistency of care to have a plan for discipleship. Next is routine. This is huge. This is huge to this day with my own son. If his routine is in any way changed, everything just grinds to a halt. If I ask him to feed the dog before he brushes his teeth, it's just like, what? No, that's impossible. I can't do that. Routine is very, very important. Routine and structure in the life of a family impacted by disability is huge, and for the individual in particular. So consider in the ministries of your church, the transitions, like in children's ministry, going from one thing to the next. Transitions are often a very difficult point. So we can help them through that, through presenting verbal schedules, visual schedules, so we prepare and look ahead to where the transitions will be. Using a first-then board, which I'll show in another slide. Helping communicate visually, coaching them during the transition, which to me is another aspect of discipleship, honestly. Showing that care and intentionality to prepare them for the next event. If they're someone like me who has to fidget constantly, give them something that's a fidget for them, that helps them be comforted and also be calm and more likely to transition well. Think about discomfort. It says comfort, but really it's discomfort. If you break in routine, like I shared briefly about Eli, it can cause discomfort. It can cause escalations if they're not prepared for it. Maintaining routine allows continued ministry to them. It allows you to introduce new things. The example I gave about having an individual not attack Todd for 5 minutes, then 10 minutes or 15, but it also allows you to say, how about the next objective is we sit and we talk to Todd for 5 minutes. Give them some choices in it so that they understand what's going on in their environment and that it's not all forced upon them. A little bit of independence can go a long ways. But do what you can to keep preset routines whenever possible. So here's an example of some visual schedules and first then using visuals to help. Often families will do social stories. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, where during the week they're preparing their child for the environment to come, and they're telling this story about, on Friday's going to be this thing, and then we'll wake up Saturday morning and we'll do this thing, and then we'll do this and we'll do that. And then Sunday morning, we get up, and at 8 o'clock, you're going to be ready, and at 8:30, we're going to have breakfast, and at 9, we're going to go to church. And then you're going to meet Eileen at the door, and she's going to take you to class. And it's this social story. told over and over again throughout the week to prepare that individual for the routine to be anticipated. And again, keeping routine allows us to minister. Something that can be helpful in that routine is having either a bulletin insert or a separate bulletin that has visuals and text of what Sunday's going to look like. It's another way of showing that care. There's a ministry called Simply the Gospel that does that kind of stuff. They help prepare bulletin inserts and bulletins for churches that are having a more accessible bulletin insert. Not saying everybody has to do that, but that's something to consider. Is there something you can have on the side that's going to help the individual with special needs be able to function within the congregation? Next, a big word. It starts with different and ends with more letters. Differentiation. What works for one person may not work for others. Both, that applies to us, it applies to those with disabilities, across all disabilities. So we need to meet the person where they're at. We need to, again, think about the different ways that we can engage them, whether it's visuals, whether it's taking a break here and there, whether it's the physical accommodations of fidgets. What sort of things can we do? A big one is breaking multi-step activities down into smaller chunks. And I'll use men as an example for this. Men out there, if our wives give us a list of 4 things to go get at the store, how many things do we come home with? Not 4, it's usually 6 or 7. How many things do we come home with that she asked for? Maybe 2. Because we get in there, we forget, we need it broken down into like smaller chunks, and we go and we're like, yes, I got milk, I got eggs, and oh my goodness, I got Doritos, I got Pepsi, oh yeah, and the guys are coming over, so I need like nacho cheese, I need candy bars. So break things down into smaller chunks, both for us men in the room, but also practically in differentiation of thinking of ways that you can help that child engage and work their way through the environment that they're in. And try to give them increased opportunities to respond in that environment, to help them engage in the world that they're in that environment that they're in. I mentioned last night that oftentimes, a child or adult with special needs will fixate on certain things. I used the example of trains last night. For some, it's dinosaur, whatever it is. There's some fixation. Figure out how to work that into the environment so they can find some familiarity and therefore some comfort and may be able to engage more readily. It is a great way to get them involved. Next, communication. Communication is huge. There's a lot here, but think about the ways that the individual in front of you communicates, whether it's verbal, nonverbal, whether it needs to be visual or spoken, whether it's eye-gazing for some. Use those things to figure out how you can get them to a point where you're showing them, you're showing them what you want to do, and then you're working towards now you do, and you're helping them to engage in it, and then doing it together, building that relationship. Communication is so important for so many things, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. Anticipation, this is huge. As you get to know the individual with special needs, you'll become aware of triggers in some situations. Maybe it's a sensory thing that triggers them and causes them to become uncomfortable and might elevate into some sort of escalated behavior. For some, it's buzzwords. I was recently with some dear friends of ours who have an adult son with autism. I said a word I didn't know was a trigger word, and I learned that it was a trigger word. And it helped me to be aware of how I needed to talk and what language I needed to be aware of when I was with this dear brother with autism. Discover those things so that you can help them to function. Sometimes it's a relationship in the room. It's another individual that sets them off. Be aware of those things, discover those things so that you can anticipate heading into that environment. Be proactive. Adjust the environment ahead of time. Help prep the child beforehand. Move the child through the activity more quickly or more slowly, whatever's needed. And stay vigilant. We in the special needs community, in our community, we talk about runners. Runners are not necessarily athletes. It's not like professional running or they're part of a running club. They're in their own running club where they perceive every exit in a room. And when you least expect it, they could be looking you right in the eyes. And in a split second, they are gone. They are, through the parking lot, wherever they may be. So we need to be vigilant. We need to be aware of the runners. And please put a volunteer with the runner that can match that pace or exceed it, which would not be me. I do not like running unless it involves a basketball or running to dinner with Kim because he chooses good food. So be vigilant. Rapport. Build a positive rapport. Remember, I think it's clear that all of this is relational. We're seeking to care for this individual in front of us, not because it's daycare, not because this is our 45 minutes of keeping them safe. That's by default. It's because we're pursuing relationship for the sake of evangelism or discipleship. And so part of that is building rapport. Rapport also helps prevent some negative behaviors. It builds trust, which can really help you if there's an individual that does struggle with escalated behaviors. If that trust and rapport is there, which was shared in Tammy's testimony last night and whoever, was it Zach? Like some amazing guy that keeps getting mentioned that he's like the whisperer in this room and can just bring calm. He's very spirit-filled, obviously. But it also helps, that rapport helps us to anticipate needs and promotes that participation that we're aiming for. So when we think of that discipleship plan, rapport is a big part of helping accomplish those goals and our bigger goal, again, of relationship that leads to evangelism and discipleship. And it also can make things fun. Within that, though, we need consistency. Yes, we can't have the same person every week. But if you commit to doing this, if you commit to serving in a special needs ministry in your churches or starting that special needs ministry, that team needs to be consistent. That consistency helps in those relationships and fostering those relationships. It helps the parents to trust you. It helps the parents to trust to the point where they can actually sit back and sit in this room and hear the word preached and have their lives transformed. Consistency. And meet the child where they're at. If you aren't naturally energetic and cheerleader type, like sometimes you're gonna have to do that if that's what that child needs. Meet them where they're at. If it's trains, great. Meet them where they're at. Some have this emotional sensor, and if you're like a tightly wound, more emotional person, some will be like, no, I don't even wanna be around them. I just feel like that guy's like Tigger getting ready to bounce around the room. So be calm and quiet if that's what's needed, or be energetic. That's the top 7. Now, a couple of resources that I would highly recommend. Wrestling with an Angel, great book. It's raw. It's a father's perspective on raising his son, his adopted son with multiple and profound disabilities. There's actually a second part to that book that we're figuring out how to publish, hopefully. So I might need someone's help on that. But Wrestling with an Angel is an excellent book. The Life We Never Expected, another great resource written by parents who had to wrestle with this life that they didn't expect. Same Lake, Different Boat is that's a classic in the disability ministry world. Written by Stephanie Hubach, which she's still very active in special needs ministry herself, her and her husband, Fred. And then I may have mentioned twice already, but Accessible Church, excellent, excellent book. And and very thankful that Crossway Publishing put it out, which has given it a much further reach. And lastly, for those who like intellectual exercises that make your brain freeze, Dignity and Destiny by John Kilner, Humanity in the Image of God. That, if I could read the first 2 chapters and stick with it, and that was all I needed, I read more. But if that book ends up in the church library or something, get it and just read those first 2 chapters, and that will give you a very biblical grounding in Imago Dei. What I talked about last night was 10 minutes of Imago Dei. Those 2 chapters will take you an hour and a half to chew on, and I think you will really be encouraged by those. And there's a number of other books out there. You guys know some of them, but those are kind of our top 5. And then resources. Awe and Wonder, again, is the curriculum. It's children's ministry, special needs ministry curriculum. It's excellent. So I would strongly commend that to you. And then Key Ministry, if you've been around special needs ministry, you've heard of them. They have a ton of different resources. They have policy resources. They have all sorts of that end of things, as well as other helpful programmatic things that might be of interest. Simply the Gospel, wonderful works. But I would also say that the important thing is to not get caught up in these things, looking for it to be the solution. This is something that your solution is to build a plan that leads towards evangelism and discipleship and caring for the body as a whole, and that these members are valued members. And these kinds of things are not solutions. They're tools that you can use to help unfold that plan as you go. We also have, Guidelight has video training. We've been blessed. I think there's 30-something. They average 5 minutes, each video. Our longest one is Disability in the Gospel, which is 11 or 12 minutes. But these are bite-sized pieces that are great for a team, whether it's a children's ministry team, of rolling that video out and then discuss it. We talk about theological things. We talk about some practical things. We actually, at the end of April, we're filming another 10 sections of video training with Sandra Peoples and myself in Houston, actually. And so this training is going to continue to grow bit by bit. So I would recommend that to you, not just because it's Guidelight, because I recommend it because I'm not in any of the videos, which I find to be an excellent thing. Okay, we did it. We got through those things. Now, we have 7 minutes. I would like you guys, so it's interactive time. Oh, how are we going to do this? All right. For the next 5 minutes, row by row, I want each of your rows, you guys are going to study a specific diagnosis for 5 minutes. So you have an option of 3 diagnoses: autism, cerebral palsy, and Down syndrome. So in your rows, for the next 5 minutes, you can pull out your phones now. And I want you to consider, what are a couple of things that you learned about that diagnosis that maybe you didn't know? And now that you have maybe been encouraged towards a mindset of relationship and evangelism and discipleship, how has what you learned, what does that mean for you in the church? What does it mean for that individual in the church? Ready? Go. And talk amongst yourselves. It should be a little loud in here.